Greetings, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I have drifted into the underworld. The Star Wars Underworld. I have a bad feeling about this.
Here we go. We must go to the lower levels. The underworld.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
You're after something.
Ben.
Since I've started the underworld, I've met so many great friends.
Chris.
I grew up in the 1990s, and mall packaging is nostalgic for me.
Dominic.
What I love most about Star Wars is that it's fun and it's all-round good times.
So, this is where the fun begins.
May the Force be with us.
This thing really moves!
Whoa! I like this!
I can't believe you came all this way to see me.
Why am I not in the intro? I gotta come up with a snappy line.
What's up, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Star Wars Underworld Podcast. We are your source for the latest breaking Star Wars reviews, news, and discussion each and every week. And this week on the show, we're going to be talking about the 5th episode of Skeleton Crew Season 1. You have a lot to learn about pirates. We want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Most of our crew has abandoned ship for the holidays, as they should, but we still have a crazy pilot and co-pilot still here. My name is Chris. Joining me, it's my co-partner in crime, Mr. Dominic Jones.
Hello, Chris. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Great to be back on this podcast. Apparently, we're speed running through the intro today.
I know. I basically did a cartwheel over myself on that one. No, I've only said it 1,000 times.
Yeah. No, why would that be memorized? Yeah, not like it gets said once a week. It's great to be here. Even without our two usual crewmates, we made them walk the plank because they wanted to spend the holidays with their families. Oh, how dare they? But I'm very excited. I'm glad to talk about Skeleton Crew. I'm excited to talk about it. And it was fun to watch a new Star Wars thing on Christmas. It was like, that was a nice little wrinkle to this year's celebrations. In the past, we've had movies out around this time. So there's been, Star Wars and Christmas kind of became intertwined in the, mid 2010s with all the sequel films. But we've never had something like literally on Christmas Eve, the way we had this episode of Skeleton Crew. And I wasn't able to watch it on Christmas Eve, so I watched it on Christmas Day. It was like getting another present. So it was pretty good. And I'm excited to talk about it here. But before we get to Skeleton Crew, we are recording this on December 26th, aka Boxing Day if you live in the Commonwealth. But it's a day after Christmas, a day after the big day. As we said, Star Wars and Christmas, they go together like two things that go together. I've stopped doing metaphors after Hannah called me out for ifs and buts for candy and nuts. We'd all have a Merry Christmas, so I'm not doing those anymore. But they go together
here, though.
Yeah, you're right. They go together like I don't know, turkey and gravy. I don't know, something Christmassy. Santa and Rudolph. I don't know. So did you have any Star Warsing with your Christmas this year, Chris? I know you got on the sweater. You got on the classic.
Yes, I've had this sweater for a while. It's Grogu's on the sweater and the mythosaur skull. But I don't know. I mean, I'm halfway through right now because I've done Christmas with the immediate family, but not extended family yet. And it tends to be kind of balanced with Star Wars stuff between the two. But I'm trying to think. Did I actually get something Star Wars from immediate family this year? I'm trying to think. This miite have actually been. Yes, I did. I got keychains. It's like impossible for me not to. I'm like, there always has to be something. Yes, I got some die-cast keychains that are like bronze colored from like 1977. It's like Han Solo, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and probably Darth Vader would be the fourth one, logically.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so I got those and maybe some other things, but at this point, it was nothing too big. The reason why is because I basically told everybody, I'm going to go to Japan. I need help with this. Whatever you do to help me get to Japan. So my main present this year was a passport. Which are absurdly expensive in the United States. Like, I was shocked how much it cost. It was basically the price of a celebration ticket.
Mm.
So that was the main thing, was the actual money for a passport, so I could go get my passport renewed, so I can leave the country and go to Japan.
I always forget, and I wish Hannah were here to back me up on this. You Americans not having passports. This is a thing that the rest of the world doesn't understand, because like we have ours. It's a requirement for me for any celebration or Comic-Con or anything.
Well,
it's a must have. Whereas, you and Ben and everybody, you're just crossing state lines. It's not a problem.
So I should mention the fact that I have a passport, and I have an active passport. It just so happens that it expires next month.
Yeah.
So I had to get it renewed. So that's not me. That's not me. I have a passport. It's just about to expire.
Yeah, to be fair, that was me right before Comic-Con last year. I was like, oh, right. Better go do that. Better get that taken care of.
The thing that is actually, interestingly enough, if you drive between American states, they don't care. No one cares. Very, very rarely does anyone check or say anything to you when you're driving. It's only once in a while there'll be some roadblock set up. It's very, very rare. But if you fly between US states and you fly out of one and into the other one, you actually do need a passport.
Really?
However, recently they've been requiring the same type of documentation that you'd have to provide for a passport to get one for a ID card, either a driver's license or a non-driver's ID card. So the ID cards have actually worked as a passport for, I believe you can also use them to get to Canada. I might be wrong, but I think maybe Mexico, one of the countries.
Yeah, I don't think it's to Canada, but I do, like, I remember the one and only time I've flown between states was around this time, about 6-7 years ago, for the Last Jedi premiere, because I think I flew down to see you in California, and we went and did the premiere thing, and then we flew to Texas to see Zach and Ben, and so I flew from Los Angeles to Dallas, and I remember like seeing people just like showing their driver's license or some other kind of ID, going, oh right, we are not leaving the country, because when I think of flying, it almost always involves leaving the country. Well, that's good. It's good that you got your passport. Yeah. You're ready for Japan. I was expecting a phrase book to be one of the other
Watashi wa Katoba wa. I'm good.
Oh, you're all set.
I have no idea what I just said. Hopefully,
not a clue.
For YouTube. We'll find out in 5 seconds.
Well, yeah. And we're offline. Okay. All right. Nice. Well, that's good. I like the prepping for Japan. For me, it's been interesting the last 2 Christmases, right? Because growing up, it would always do Christmas with extended family, and be a lot of cousins around. And when I was little, there were a lot of kids. I was sort of on the younger side of all of my cousins, and we grew up together, and Christmas went from being like a kid's holiday to being an adult's holiday, and there were like no kids around for a few years. And then in the last couple of years, my cousins have all started having children, so now it's like gone full circle and starting to become a kid's holiday again. And so like this Christmas, on Christmas Eve, this is what I was doing instead of watching Skeleton Crew. My youngest cousin who is 3 years old, she shows up, and her parents are like, guess what, we've started reading Star Wars books to her, so she knows like the Star Wars story and stuff. I'm like, that's great, that sounds like a lot of fun. And we did our Christmas stockings, and in mine was a pack of Star Wars holiday cards. You can see here, it's like just a regular deck of playing cards, but they've got like Star Warsy things on it. And my little 3-year-old cousin, whose birthday is, and this is true, May 4th, she comes up to me and she's like, what are these? And so we literally went through an entire deck of playing cards, and I explained who every single character was. Wow. And we had a lot of it was just like a little like fun bit of Star Wars education for my little cousin there. We had it was really fun. And like on the cards, you'll have like C-3PO and R2-D2 covered in Christmas lights or something. And so, it's, oh yeah, there's 3PO and R2 putting up the Christmas lights. They're all tangled up in it. Why are they tangled up in it? Because Christmas lights get tangled and they're robots and they're not very good at untangling things. And you know, we were having lots of fun that way. So that was my little Star Warsing up of Christmas. But yeah, it was a nice time. But
I was scrambling trying to make sure everybody had seen all of Skeleton Crew before 9 o'clock when episode 5 was coming out, and I was almost successful. Successful. I got my mom and my stepdad to watch the first 3 episodes the night before, and then I was gonna have them watch the 4th one right before the 5th one came out, and I was almost successful. And then one other member of my immediate family, who I shall not name, informed me that they had not seen a single episode yet of the show, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So I had to wait till people left. And then we watched it. So we were able to watch it that night. I was able to watch it with my family, and they didn't know what was going on. We had to wait for certain people to leave who had not been caught up. There was only one person though. Everybody else was caught up. So
I was like, Merry Christmas, get out of here. We gotta watch Star Wars. Let's go.
Yeah, it delayed it by about an hour. Like I think it was like 11 by the time we ended up finishing it. But you know, it happened. We watched it that night.
You watched it within the first 24 hours, which is I think the important thing for registering the numbers.
We watched it before actual Christmas. So
there you go.
That counts.
There you go. It all counts. All right, let's plug some things and then we'll break down this episode.
Forgot that was the thing. Punch that subscribe button, Chewy. Yeah, also super chat with us. Yeah, also become a channel member. And then also like subscribe if you're listening on a podcast out, because that's a thing. I hope. That is still where most people find the show. I still rarely do. I do listen to things on YouTube Music sometimes, and I don't know how that happens, but it does. It just shows up on the screen, and I push it and listen. And so I think I'm subscribed. Then also check out our Discord. Lots of great stuff over there, and our game nits are still going strong over there. So links in the description to that. We're on social media at the SWU. This is your weekly reminder to jump ship off of whatever social media you're on and go to Threads, because it is a sinking ship everywhere else. That is very clear. But we are on Threads. We've got a good safe ship that is not leaking over there, so check it out. And make sure you check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network. We got Raeside, Iron Cannon, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy, Tractor Beam, and more. So check out all that awesome stuff when you're done watching this.
All right, so as we said, we're talking about Skeleton Crew season 1 episode 5. You have a lot to learn about pirates, written by my young Joe Wessner and directed by Jake Schreier. I'd say let's go around the table, but it's a pretty small table this week.
Still counts.
Still counts, Chris. But I'm going to throw it to you first. What'd you think of episode 5 of Skeleton Crew?
This was a very relieving episode for me because, as everybody knows, last week was kind of a rough landing. Like I was not a big fan of last week's episode. And so I had faith in the show, but I still, was relieved that I do think it returned to its former glory days and weeks with this episode. It was good length. They added that extra 10 minutes that was missing for the last episode in. So that was good. And then I think that the pacing, the adventure, it just felt like more the pacing of the show that I kind of had come to love from the first 3 episodes. So I loved the episode. I thought it was really fun and interesting. And and of all the episodes, I feel like this is the most Goonies-like episode we've gotten so far. Like it was so much like a pirate adventure, like story, and it reminded me very directly of the Goonies movie and several scenes. So this is a good one. I'm very glad that we got this episode, and I think it's good timing coming off of one that wasn't everybody's cup of blue milk.
I agree. I think this was a really fun episode. Like it was sort of the perfect episode for like a holiday kind of release. It wasn't a Christmas episode, but it had kind of a fun, adventure vibe to it. Like, the only show that I follow that does like regular Christmas episodes is Doctor Who, and like they have to walk the balance every year of doing something that is kind of Christmassy, but it's also just sort of fun, and you can kind of kick back and watch it. Everybody can watch it together, but also ties in with the larger story in kind of meaningful ways. And this episode, I think, found that balance. It obviously didn't have anything to do with the holidays, but it was a fun adventure that I think anybody could watch and enjoy. Even if you weren't completely caught up, I don't think you had to kick everybody out of your house. I think you could have allowed they who shall not be named to stick around for this one. But it's I think but it still was an important episode. Like the twist at the end where we again, as the show wanted us to think we could trust Jod, this episode gives us the reveal that really you should never have trusted this guy. And I thought they played that very well once they arrive in the captain's lair down there. But all the stuff leading up to it was fun. It was a good sort of goofy adventure through the spa, all the stuff with SM-33 talking about, this dangerous pirate's lair, and they show up and it's this like luxury vacation place and all that stuff. And there was some good humor all through it, all leading up to that last shot of Jude Law calling the lightsaber to his hand, and an excellent cut to black just as the saber turned on. That was some nice editing by the crew. I mean, let's start with Jode, because this is, I think, kind of his episode. The previous episode was Neil's episode and maybe a bit of Fern's episode. The previous one was kind of KB's episode. The first two were very much Wim's episodes. This is the first time I think Jod really takes center stage. Starting from right at the beginning of the episode when Wim, when SM-33 is telling stories about his old captain, and Wim kind of runs away to the back room to read his old Jedi books, and Jod gets a sense that like something's wrong. He goes and he sits down with Wim, and he does something we haven't, that Star Wars does from time to time, but they don't do very often, which is take a classic piece of Star Wars advice, your focus determines your reality, and expands on it, and really does seem, this is where the episode does a good job of setting up the betrayal by making him seem like a really nice, genuine, caring person who, might be a Jedi even if he actually isn't. What did you think of this scene between Wim and Jod at the start here?
I never bought that this dude was a nice person. Like I know they tried to convince us, but there was always something off about him. And again, his origins, we know that he's the original pirate leader. So like you can't be a leader of a ruthless gang of pirates and be a good guy. Like that just doesn't work, especially in a pirate story, let alone just stories in general. So I never trusted him. I mean, it was always kind of weird how he just like paid some credits to get the Eopies back. Like maybe he did, but I don't know. The fact that we didn't see that, I still think that was a little sketchy too.
Might have been a little murder going on.
Yeah, so none of this surprised me. And the Jedi wisdom thing, he's clearly like, obviously he has the Force, but as far as the Jedi stuff goes, like he's definitely ripping off of some just classic Jedi tropes there, including a very tropey classic Jedi saying, your focus determines your reality. Clearly Qui-Gon heard that from somebody else. The Jedi have been saying that a lot for other people who aren't Jedi to know about it. So yeah, never trusted him. Was not surprised at anything that happened in this episode. It was almost a kind of a relief to actually have it come out and not have this odd tension of trying to like put your mind around why he's being a good at any point. But I mean, I think it's pretty clear up to this point. Everything that he does is just to appease the children when he thinks that he can use them. I mean, because I had done that rewatch of all the other episodes of my family, I was brought back to the moment when he's trying to escape the port planet. I forget what it's called, the space station thingy. And he's trying to escape that with the kids. And then the kids realize that SM-33 is still left behind. And, he just wants to leave SM-33. And then they tell him, trying to convince him not to. And you can tell that he's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He's not doing it because it's the reason, because he thinks that it's wrong to leave a man behind. He's doing it because the kids want him to, and he wants to ingratiate himself to them and earn their trust so that he can keep using them unsuspectingly to get to their planet. That's very, very clear. So long way of saying, not surprised.
I think I've wanted to believe in Jod. I think I've sort of wound up seeing a lot of the show kind of from Wim's perspective, and have looked at this character and gone, yes, I don't think I've completely trusted him the way Wim has, but I think I've sort of looked at him and gone, yes, he's a bad guy, he's a pirate, he's out for himself, but he's a pirate with a heart of gold. Yeah, I still expect there to be another twist to this, because he's giving the Jedi wisdom. To me, that does say that he has some sort of Jedi history. I go back to like the very first episodes with him within, where we see him as the pirate under the helmet, and then we see him in jail, waiting for helping the kids escape. And my initial reaction to this character was, this is Kanan if he never met Hera. This is, a Jedi who, fled Order 66 and is now left to fend for himself. And in fending for himself, had to, make a kind of a deal with the devil and become a pirate. And, a Jedi's skill set could be very useful in piracy. He's making things float. We see that throughout the episode where he uses the Force a lot more in this episode. I think this is really the only times we've seen him use the Force outside of the key in the first episode are, for the most part, here in the 45 minutes that play out as you have a lot to learn about pirates. And so we sort of see what made him successful as a pirate. And it's a lot of the same things that it's the same powers that make him successful as a Jedi, or make someone successful as a Jedi, just used for ill instead of good. So I think there is some Jedi history there. But ultimately, like you said, he is out for himself. He will comfort Wim if he thinks that is going to be useful for him, because he still recognizes that he needs the kids up until a point to get to the directions to Aton. He's got to find those coordinates. So he still needs the kids for now. So he needs them on his side. And therefore he sees Wim in trouble. So or Wim struggling. So he goes to him and tries to give him a pep talk to, get him to bounce back. And that pep talk, he recognizes that Wim doesn't need a pirate's pep talk. Fern maybe would want a pirate's pep talk. Wim needs a Jedi one, because Wim, like all of us who are Star Wars fans, loves stories about Jedi. And so he gives him that, and he reaches back into his own history. I guess speculation here, obviously. We don't know where the story is going, but I could see it as a version of this being, he reaches back into his own history to help Wim. So in that moment, he's doing a nice thing, but ultimately it's to get everybody into place so that they are there in Captain Reynolds' lair, and he can, call up the code and go after Fern's leadership, get SM-33 as his own sidekick, and head back to Aton as the, sole owner of the Onyx Cinder to, plunder the Old Republic mint, the last Old Republic mint that exists on the planet.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're coming at this from the perspective of analyzing it as a story, and typically stories have this like didactic, moral element to it of, these are the heroes, these are the villains do villainous things, the heroes do heroic things, right? And But I mean, really, if you really want to think about it, it's kind of people are up to their own, right to make a determination if someone's really a good person or a bad person. Obviously, the majority of people might decide one way or the other, and that tends to be how it is. But, because everybody's kind of a mixture of good and bad things. And even the best people have bad things about them. And even the worst people might have a few good things about them. It comes to my mind the fact that notorious mobster Al Capone did a lot of charity work in his city. And it's up to people to speculate whether or not, the motivations are pure or not, just as we are with Jod. But so you don't necessarily have to say he's doing everything that he's doing just as a manipulation. Just because he has a motivation to get something that he wants, and that motivation is going to override every moral sensibility that you could imagine a person would have, and he would betray anybody for it. It doesn't necessarily mean that every good thing that he does is, or every moment of vulnerability or compassion that he expresses is manipulation or fake. Like,
absolutely,
it's possible that he genuinely does care about these kids. It's just he cares about himself more. He cares about what he wants more. And so while I do think that there are moments where manipulation is clear, like when he first meets them, and like I said, he goes and gets SM-33. Clearly he's not doing that for them, but he's doing that for himself. There's no reason to do that for them, or otherwise he wouldn't have been so hesitant about it. But these other moments when these comforting women saying these things, he could genuinely be doing that out of whatever goodness does exist in his heart. And he obviously is going to be thinking of himself as the hero. Every villain thinks of themselves as the hero. So he thinks he's doing a good thing. He might not be thinking in his head like, oh, I need to comfort this kid because I still need this kid. I can't have this kid like freaking out on me because I need to use him. Like in that moment, he might be thinking, oh, I feel, I see myself in this kid.
Yeah.
Reminds me of me when I was younger. I'm going to comfort him. And he might be actually doing that for an altruistic reason, which I hope so, because that makes him much more a complex, interesting character and more realistic than just a villain who's just doing all bad things. And whenever he does something good, it's because he's manipulating somebody.
Right. Like the Emperor is that all bad character who, when he's doing something good, is to manipulate somebody. Like if we look back on Rebels in the last season, there's all those scenes where he's appearing to Ezra as sort of a kind old man and trying to get him to open up the world between worlds for him. And ultimately that it is a manipulation. But here you're right. I don't think he went into that scene, into that moment with Wim going, God, I have to just say anything to get this kid to, go along with what I'm doing. I think he went into that moment going, okay, I need the crew to stick together. What does this kid need? Can I actually help him? And the advice that he gives is good advice. It's quality advice. Your focus determines your reality. You have vision. You have the vision to make your life what you want it to be. Solid advice. That's just, like I always say this about Star Wars wisdom is it's not Star Wars wisdom. It's not Jedi wisdom. There's nothing unique about it to being a Jedi. It's just good wisdom, good advice for anybody who's watching it, anybody who's listening to it. And Jod, for whatever evil plans he may have, or maybe not even evil, just selfish plans he may have that come to fruition later in the episode, in that moment is telling Wim and by extension the audience, here's something you can do if you're unhappy. Here's a way to think about things in a different way so that you are no longer or so that you can change the position that you're in if you're not happy. And that was a nice moment, regardless of what comes next. And for a character like Wim, that might wind up being important to him later on. That might be something that he comes back to when it comes time to actually stop Jod. Much in the same way that George Lucas had Anakin training the rebels on Onderon, the foundation of the Rebel Alliance that will one day oppose Darth Vader. Jod may have given Wim the wisdom here that will be his undoing in a later episode. That there's something very Star Warsy about that.
Yeah, I mean, people might have the correct view of things. I mean, think about somebody who has the correct view and tells the truth and gives good advice. Darth Maul, like one of the most villainous characters in Star Wars. And so it's like you might have an accurate view of things. You might be able to even give good advice about a situation. But when it comes down to the choices that you make for yourself, it's sometimes it's less of like, is this an evil choice because you're an evil person? Or is it a cowardly choice because you're a weak person? And and maybe that's what it comes down to. Like look at the sensibilities, talking about characters like Anakin and Luke and all these things. Like Ahsoka and Anakin are very much cut from the same cloth. They're both, very rebellious characters. They're both very independent, autonomous characters. They care very much about the truth. They care very much about fairness. The difference is that Ahsoka is a strong character. She's a brave character. She's willing to walk away from a situation that isn't serving her. She's willing to let other people go. She's willing to let other people do what they're going to do, not try to control them. Anakin is a weak has a weak and he has a lack of strength there. He's a cowardly character. He tries to take everything into his own hands. He tries to control other people, and that's what we interpret as evil. That's what we interpret as Anakin's fall to the dark side. His cowardice and him trying to take things into his own hands when we should just let things be. And so I think, if you kind of extend that to this episode and like Jod, it might be more of a question of, is this a good guy or is this a bad guy? It's more of like, how strong of a character does he have? Like, or does he have weakness where he feels like the only way to protect himself is treasure and wealth? And he feels like he doesn't have the strength to do that in any way. And then you compare that to, the contrast of a lot of the kids, like Neil, especially, like, they actually have a lot of inner strength, and showing a lot of fortitude and inner strength and a lot of bravery and willingness to put themselves in situations to help each other. And so, yeah, I think that might be an interesting way to kind of grade the qualities of the characters amongst the, do they have a weak character or do they have a strong, brave character?
Yeah, I like that way of looking at it a lot. I think that's accurate in terms of the way you've sort of laid it out for Joe, that he, he is in a situation where he thinks his only way forward is what he's doing, and it's a weakness that he can't see the larger picture. He can't see that there's another way. And however we may feel about the previous episode, the point of it was Neil saying there is another way. Like, that is the theme. That is what Neil was teaching Hannah or Hannah or whatever her name was in the previous episode. Hanya
Tarding.
Yeah. Took me a second. It's that's what that's the wisdom that Neil was passing on, and he may perhaps play a role in getting through to Jode if that's the direction this story is going. But in terms of reveals, we also get the reveal of what is actually going on Aton. It is the last Old Republic mint, very much a capitalist's sort of treasure planet, gold pile of gold. Along the lines of what you were saying, that there's something to the great work being related to gold, and that is quite literally the money of the Old Republic. So I take it you did a small victory lap when
definitely
when
I saw that, I'm like, I knew it. I mean, I would have been shocked if it was anything else. Again, this is a pirate story. This episode just underscored so much that they're doing the Star Wars version of the Goonies and Treasure Island, which that Goonies is influenced by. And so it would just be so strange to have a classic pirate story and the MacGuffin is not a bunch of gold. It would just be very strange. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, I was relieved that, my intuition was correct about that when it was revealed that it's a pile of credits, cold, hard credits.
Yeah. And that it factors into, the speculation that has been going on about, what mysteries are there on Aton, because we got a little bit more of that in the opening scene with the parents. And why are they cut off from the rest of the galaxy? Are they aware of what has been going on? The kids certainly are, but are the powers that be, the supervisor, do they know what's going on? How in tune are they with the rest of the galaxy? And if a pirate were to show up on Aton, what would they find when they get to the mint? This episode does a nice job of forwarding all of those little mysteries while adding some more wrinkles to, the thing we talked about a lot with the first episode. On the surface, everything seems great on Aton, but as soon as you step out of line, even in the slightest little ways, as soon as you plug in the wrong USB port or USB drive into your work computer, the droids are there asking to see your hands and sending you up to the coordinator, who, if that's not your friend, I think you're in a lot of trouble. Again, forwarding the mystery of Aton in this episode.
You know what? I think they did that might turn out to be extremely brilliant in the writing is, as I was rewatching the series, I was once again paying attention to Ferns' tall tales, because Fern would constantly be telling Wim and the kids about these stories that were not true, like about the subdivision that was under construction and everybody was poisoned and they all died and the enclosure, like all this stuff. But what's so interesting is, amongst all of those tall tales that she told, there was one where she said that kids that don't do well in school get sent down to the mines to work. I think that's true, because we had speculated about that before, about they didn't really explain what would happen to people if they failed the test. They just said it would be a bad thing. And we don't see any characters that seem to not have a place in the society. And it's assumed that everybody has a place in the society, has passed the test based on the way that they're explaining it. So we'd speculated that something bad and dark might be happening to the kids as they grow up to be adults that are not found useful to the society. And so the fact that she says that, I think it might actually be the truth, obscured from us by the fact that everything else that she says in that context is a lie. They might be hiding it from us in plain sight, that's really what's going on, and that there is a bunch of people down there mining gold that are the rejects of society that didn't do well and to fall into the administrative class.
And because whatever the treasure looks like on Aton, it's not going to look like the pirate treasure we saw in this episode. They've done that visual now. We saw how that looked when it came to Captain Reynolds stuff. So that's the image we have in our mind when we think of a pirate story and treasure. We've seen that now on the show. It's unlikely that they're going to repeat that visual. So it would be something else, something much more sinister, like some sort of like very dangerous mine shaft where people are not treated with any sort of care or dignity. They are it's unsafe working conditions that where people are just probably falling to their deaths every day mining the gold that's used in those dataries. And who knows what even goes on with those dataries, if they're even leaving the planet, because the planet is so obscured from everything. Is there now just somebody or some group of people at the top of Aton Society who are just hoarding those coins that we know out in the galaxy are very valuable. Like, that's how Jode gets away with anything in this episode, is he's throwing around those the dataries like they're nothing. And even to pass the puzzle, the acid puzzle, all he had to do was throw one piece of coin in there. It wasn't like he had to empty out a whole bag of treasure. It was just one of those things was enough to open up the access to whatever Captain Reynolds had down there. So it seems as though it's very clear that those things are very, very valuable because they are rare. So if there is somebody or some group of people on Aton saying, okay, you're making all of this, we're sacrificing anybody who doesn't have a place, and anybody who does have a place, we're keeping them in a boring desk job where they aren't allowed to question or step out of line in any way. But we get to hoard all this wealth amongst ourselves. If they wanted to go to Canto Bight or this planet in this episode, they'd be they'd be very welcomed there by the rich owners with open arms.
I mean, my initial thoughts are that the planet's like an autonomous planet, and they just have this structure because that's just the way they want to have their dystopian totalitarian government. And they maybe they don't want all the citizens to know how much wealth the planet has, so that people don't, maybe they might get greedy and fight over it. So like that's my first instinct to it. That's not the most interesting thing that could happen, though. It would be more interesting, I think, if it's more like a Banana Republic type situation where somebody's actually exploiting everyone on the planet, and that the whole totalitarianism and the need to know power structure that's going on, like that's all kind of forced on them by whoever's subjugating them, whoever's exploiting them, and that this gold is just being shipped to somebody else, and they only get a small part of it just to maintain their role as workers in this great work.
Well, and that's where the story of last week, the Ad Akron stuff, I think factors into things again, because that shows a version of the Aton Society that is broken down into just sort of warring tribes. And in the episode with Kim the Owl, she talks about there's a whole bunch of planets that were kind of hidden away as the jewels of the Republic, of the old Republic. And if they were all sort of the places where the money was being made, and all except Aton have, descended into, sort of an apocalyptic dystopian, nightmare, then whoever's in charge of Aton has a real incentive to make sure that everybody is living in ignorance. Because they've seen what happens. People get greedy and they fight over the wealth, and so they keep everybody living in ignorance. I'm not saying that they're doing this altruistically, because in fact I'm pretty sure they aren't. They're doing it to maintain their own status, their own wealth. But they want everybody to think they have everything they need, but also be afraid to step out of line, like we've seen the parents be, Wim's dad and Fern's mom in particular. And it adds, every episode is sort of adding a new layer and a new wrinkle to this, and that I think that's been a really fun element of this series, where it's not like Ahsoka or the Acolyte, where like each episode leads into the next directly. Where the episodes feel like continuations of the previous ones. Each episode is its own little adventure, but it very much it still needs to be watched, I think, in the right order, more or less. You can jump in here and there, but it isn't like one story that's just got random breaks in it. It's like here are 8 stories together that make a bigger one, and that I think has been kind of refreshing for Star Wars TV. The last couple of shows have really felt like 6-hour movies that have been chopped up into 8 episodes. This has felt like 8 episodes that's telling a larger story. Well, let's talk a little bit just sort of about the kind of we've talked about the twists and the Jode of it all. The adventure element I thought was a lot of fun. The booby traps and that sort of thing. I could have stood for a little bit more of that. I think they could have kept that going for a little bit. I would have liked to have seen maybe 1 or 2 more, real challenges. But overall it was a lot of fun to see. I loved the the bit with the laser where it cuts through and it just goes over the kid's head, but Jode and SM-33 have to duck. That was a nice touch. I liked Wim figuring out just opening up the trap door at the end so that they fall through, and that's how they escape Jode. And of course the lightsaber being there. As Wim was holding it, I was looking at it going, I think that's upside down.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's no way this is going to go well for this kid in this episode. There's still way too much ground to cover. And I'm looking at it going, that's upside down. And as soon as it lit up, I was like, oh no. And I this is completely speculative, but I wonder if this episode was early on in the production, because the kid who plays Wim just looks a little bit younger than he does in some of the later episodes. And so it made some of the moments where he feels really scared and really upset, it made them hit a little bit harder, I thought.
Wasn't it reported that a lot of the series they had to go in and shoot it again?
There was a lot of reports that either they wanted to do reshoots or they did do a fair amount of reshoots. But it was complicated by the fact that children that age, they change a lot, and
right.
As Chris Ford and John Watts did an interview recently where they talked about if they get to do a season 2, they're like, we have to factor that into the story. They're not going to do the Stranger Things thing where the season 2 starts a couple days after season 1, but everybody looks 2 years older because
Well, Hawkins is weird. But they at least did some of that kind of correctly in the last season. But I think it's possible that they were able to reshoot some of it, and maybe that those scenes are actually so good they didn't need to reshoot it, and thus that's why we see something that looks like it was shot first, because it doesn't make I know they do tend to shoot things out of order sometimes, so maybe for some reason production wise it made sense to shoot this first, but I don't know. I think it's more likely explanation that it's just a lot of the other stuff, it was like the second go around for it many months later or a year later or something. But those scenes weren't.
They just worked they worked as is. We also have them being chased by the gang of pirates led by Jaleel White. Seems like a whole bunch of them got burned up by the acid.
Pretty brutal.
Which was brutal and well conveyed on the screen.
This isn't a kid's show.
I mean, they didn't show it. They didn't show it.
Okay.
They implied it. I think you can get away with the. I still think the show skews younger than, say, Mando. Like, I think on Mando they would have had a shot of at least somebody's hand sticking out of the acid as they went ah. But I do think this one skews younger. But I don't say that as a criticism. I've liked it as much, if not more, than some of the ones that have intentionally tried to skew older.
Well, it's an interesting genre because this genre does exist. There's a genre of kids films that are not all ages audiences kids films. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Stand By Me is an R-rated film.
Yes, you're right.
I think. I think The Goonies is I think The Goonies might be PG-13, but that might have been before PG-13 was a thing. Yeah. So it might have been a PG movie that should have been PG-13, but it was rated PG because PG-13 hadn't been invented yet. I can't remember. But there's a lot of films in that era that definitely are about young children, that are young children's films in a sense, because they're coming of age films, but they do have some adult content in it. And this show, I think, kind of falls into that more and more, because it's you have that absolutely really brutal scene where Jod just very crudely and violently murders a bunch of people that you're talking about with the acid, and then you have the reference to a concubine in this episode, and then you have a literal red light district in an earlier episode. So there's a lot of kind of adult themed things in this show that I'm not expecting from even Star Wars.
Yeah, with the exception, I think, of the acid, because that's very blatant what happened there. I think anybody watching it figures that out. What has been fun about this show is that it does feel like one of those things that if a kid who is the same age as the characters watches it,
Yeah.
they're getting one experience.
Yeah.
And then if their parent is watching it with them, they're picking up on all the other things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's never spelled out, what exactly is going on the pirate moon. You just know it's bad things. And if you're older, if you've experienced more, if you're not a child, you know what's being suggested, you know what's being implied. It's not like Andor where they just come out and say what it is. So it has that, like, there's two stories that are, the story is happening, but there's two sort of levels of understanding of it, I think is the way I'm getting at it. And so I think in that regard, it allows for younger audiences to still enjoy it without it, being a quote unquote kids show the way we think of, like, a kids show.
It's such a funny thing is, one of my family members is visually impaired, and so I'll watch the episodes sometimes with the audio descriptions of what's going on, and some of the things that they say during some of those scenes are kind of funny. Like the red light district scene when they tried very hard to explain what was going on the screen without actually saying what was going on the screen. And I think they just said something like the people, there's characters in windows with like a glowing red light or like something like that. And I think they called it something different. They called it like a club or something. I don't know. But the other funny thing from that too was that they talked about characters putting oxygen masks on in the bars. And I, of course, watching that, I'm like, that is not oxygen. There's no way that's oxygen. They didn't come all the way here to this moon to pay money to breathe oxygen out of a mask. No,
it's not like in Spaceballs where he opens up the can of air and starts drinking it. No. It's something else. There's more going on. There's more going on there. But speaking of this sort of like, sort of dynamic of like, this is kids in an adult world. And so it makes the sort of the storytelling and the experience of watching it kind of, it gives it a fun sort of like wink and nodness to it. There is a moment in this episode that kind of like calls directly to that, because when Jod turns on them and he challenges Fern for her, captainship, and he's got the knife to her throat, and she says, "You're an adult," like you, and she's like crying, like she feels so betrayed by him, and so like she's had her worldview shattered because she says, "You're an adult, you can't attack us, you can't hurt us." Like her whole life, she's been led to believe that the adults have kids' best interests in mind, which for as much as we question Aton Society, does speak well of her mother. I suppose it speaks well of the adults in her life, but they there's that moment of like it's been kind of a fun, crazy, zany adventure where they run through a lot of stuff without really understanding how dangerous and awful it is. And here's the moment where it's clear that this is not a kid's world, it's not a kid's show, as you're saying. It is it's still a dark, dangerous, scary world, and by that extension a sort of mature show, because there is an adult holding a knife to a child's neck, and even though he doesn't want to kill her, he's telling her, just yield, like get over yourself, let's end this. You're not entirely sure that he won't pull that knife across her neck, and if he feels that's the only way to get what he wants. And it goes back to what we were talking about with Jode, like he is that character that you can't really trust his motivations, and you are wondering, would he do it? And in that moment, she believes he would, and I think we as the audience believe he would too, and that makes it all the more treacherous, because up until that point there has been a little bit of even through all the darkness, there's been a whimsy to it. But as soon as he murders all those guys with the acid, everything changes, and the whimsy is gone, even with Wim holding the lightsaber upside down and it bouncing away. The kid's reaction, I can't remember that actor's name, but he sells it beautifully, or he goes from I'm gonna save the day to running and hiding. It's very tragic. And you pulled up the comment there from Ben Hart, who never heard of him, about KB's single tear is pretty heartbreaking. It's a pretty heartbreaking moment.
Yeah.
Also in the chat, Mike McCormick says they called it a dance club on the pirate world.
Dance club.
Definitely a dance club. You just go in there and you like do the Macarena and the hokey pokey and all that stuff.
There's a lot of hokey pokey going on in there. You're right about that.
Because and again, just sort of to underscore the point about, sort of the tragedy and how upset Fern is. Like, up until that point, the episode's been a lot of fun. Like when they the wise elders, because they can't have children there. Like that was, I laughed. I laughed out loud at that moment. And and the fact that they keep the bit going for a long time of the wise elders. And then there's the moment that was in a lot of the trailers where Jode and 33 are trying to plan something out, and the kids are just jumping on the bed, having a pillow fight behind them. And Jode says, "Are you listening to a word I've been saying?" And Fern goes, "Yeah." He goes, "What did I just say? Are you listening to a word I've been saying?" It was very, again, very well written, very well performed by cast and crew there.
That's the first jumping on the bed pillow fight I've seen since Lord of the Rings in a fantasy story.
And what a scene it was. What a scene it was. We mentioned Ben Hart. He's not here, but he has a segment that we would normally do on the show. And even though he's on vacation this week, I think we should still do a Ben free edition of Ben's Connection Corner. Connections in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
How's it going, everybody?
Ben's Connection Corner is filmed in front of a live studio audience. In the past, for a Benless edition of Ben's Connection Corner, I've asked Ben for what the connections would be. I didn't this week, but I did one. There was a moment in this episode. Ben's angry in the chat. He says, "How dare you?" There was a moment in this episode that was a little bit of a connection, and I think it was meant to be more of a connection, but it won't be, because of sad real world things. When they're at the spa, the manager lady, or whoever she is, she talks about how the banking clan.
Dang it, that was my connection. Now I have zero.
The banking clan was there, and that the representatives for Scipio were there, and there was a shot that lingered on a mune. I don't know how to pronounce them. Just chilling in one of those spas and one of those pools, and it made me think of the last time we saw a mune on screen, and it was in the now series finale of The Acolyte.
No, don't say that.
With Darth Plagueis's one and only on-screen appearance in Star Wars, and for folks who have read the Darth Plagueis novel, the now Legends Darth Plagueis novel, although George Lucas, either he gave notes or James Luceno read from his notes. I've never been quite clear on how it happened, but George was more involved with that book than he has been than he ever was with any other Star Wars novel, Legends or canon. Plagueis, though, much in the way that Palpatine spent his life playing the political game and building up all sorts of political capital, Plagueis did that behind the scenes by controlling banking and finance and making himself a really important part of that. And the fact that in Star Wars, if you're a certain alien species, you're sort of doomed to whatever career they are most known for.
Like Aqualishes being doomed to be architects.
Exactly.
Very hard to do when your hand gets chopped off. Sadly.
Yeah, sadly tragic. Thank you, Robot Chicken. The Muns are typically depicted as being part of the banking clan, very involved in finance, very involved in that side of the galaxy. And, I can picture a world in which the Acolyte is greenlit for a second season, as everybody believed it was going to be,
as it's still going to be,
as it could still one day be. And this was a little nod at a story that would one day be told in that second season. I'm not saying that Mun is related in any sort of way to Darth Plagueis directly through sort of familial or friendship or anything, but just kind of, when you think about the people who control the finances of the galaxy, the people who, profit off the wars and benefit from all the stuff that Rose and DJ talk about in the last Jedi.
I was thinking,
when you think about that, you'll think back to Darth Plagueis and how quite literally the Sith are involved in that plot. And so I think when they were preparing this show, knowing it would come after the Acolyte, they included that shot and those lines with the intention of it being a subtle, loose connection between the two shows, a sort of spiritual thematic connection that, unfortunately, as things stand right now, is not going anywhere, much as we would like it to be. But so a sad edition of Ben's Connection Corner, not just because Ben is not here, but because it relates to something that we wish we could see, but may never see. And with that, we will conclude this Ben-free edition of Ben's Connection Corner. Connections in the corner with Ben. It's Ben's Connection Corner. Do.
How's it going, everybody?
Ben's Connection Corner is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Ben is in the live chat threatening that next week we're going to have an extra special and extra long edition of Ben's Connection Corner. So brace yourselves.
It has to be 66 connections or it doesn't count as long.
Yeah, exactly.
We only had 6 last time.
I know he's got to work his way up. I think that should be the thing. Across the entire season, we need 66 connections.
Yeah.
So
we got to average more than 6 then, because there's not enough episodes.
So I don't know what the next live action show is going to be. I don't think we know. Season 2 of Ahsoka,
Andor.
maybe.
Andor.
You're right. Yeah. Andor. We do know what that is. I feel like I've already seen that now.
Have you? I would not be surprised.
I wish.
I feel like Canada sees it before America.
I wish. But for Andor, because it's 12 episodes, might be easier to get to 66 connections. But maybe that's the goal.
That would be 4.16666 per episode. Yeah, human calculator.
There you go. So get yourselves ready. Is there anything else we want to bring up about this episode? We've covered a lot, but it was a big episode with a lot going on. But I feel like we've hit the main points here.
I love the new bounty hunter character who's somewhere between a Night Sister and Orzing species or something.
With just a terrific Scottish accent.
Yeah,
just, fantastic. Voiced by played by the actor who was the star of Brave. There's a connection for you.
Yeah. So that was really cool. I just thought the look of the whole spa planet was really cool. I was very sad that we did not have a cameo by Tamara Morrison in the spa. Like that was such a huge missed opportunity. And it could have been Boba too. Like it could have. It was Boba in the spa. Yeah,
it was Boba. Just like a blink and you miss a cameo. Could have been.
I missed that one. So yeah, that was.
Maybe it was supposed to be. It was supposed to cut to Boba in the spa, but then they're like, "Oh, we're not doing another season of Book of Boba Fett, but we are planning another season of Acolyte." So they did the Mun instead, and now it's just nothing.
I think it's a very interesting revelation too, that the overwriter, undertaker, whatever, Ferns' mother character over Lady, the fact that she's having to stick around, like she's having to stick around. She's not as powerful as we were kind of led to believe, I think, at the beginning of the series, which is very interesting to me, because it shows that there's definitely some really powerful people in control of Aton that we are completely off screen, and those are the most powerful people if they're not even on screen. And so I'm interested to see as the show progresses, and series progresses, if they're going to stretch that storyline out longer. I'm interested to see kind of what's going on and why even someone as powerful as her is having to sneak around.
Yeah, well, and you know, it speaks to the level of sort of lockdown that they have at Aton, that even she has reached the point where she's willing to go outside of the usual official channels, where, you know, she's telling the droid to erase its memory, and it seemed in the final moments there that she was going to be ready to you know, break the rules with the other parents. We're
finding out that where Ferd got all of her sensibilities from.
Absolutely. Well, all right, then with that, let's finish things off and give some final thoughts and scores out of 10 for You Have a Lot to Learn About Pirates. And Chris, take it away. Final thoughts, score out of 10.
Very happy that we got this episode. Very happy that the series is, in my opinion, back on track. I think it bodes well for the rest of the show. I think we just had a momentary aberration and a dip, but everything else seems pretty strong. And yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I think this episode, in a lot of ways, I think captured the full breadth of the spirit of the show more than any episode has. Like, I think this is a very quintessential episode of Skeleton Crew, having all of the elements of adventure and comedy and peril and drama and just all the things, I think, that makes this show good and makes kind of this type of story good. We're in this particular episode, so I hope the future episodes are kind of constructed in a similar manner, and they really build off of this, because it's very, very much a momentum grabbing type episode that, you know, ends with a lot of momentum being pushed forward into whatever we're gonna get next week. So yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I thought it was very, very well done.
10 out of 10. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think this was of all the episodes, with the exception of maybe the second one, like, this is the one that you know, most delivers on the setup, on the premise of the show, of this sort of, you know, adventure, you know, classic 80s sort of vaguely pirate themed adventure with the kids, and this, you know, sort of wise but untrustworthy leader or adult that's gone along for the journey with them. It took us to a part of the Star Wars galaxy we don't spend a lot of time in. You know, we get little brief glimpses in at this part of the galaxy, but we don't spend a ton of time there. There was a lot of humor, but there was a lot of, like, pain in the episode too, with Wim and Fern and Neil and KB as well. But they all sort of, you know, were going through it, especially in the final moments of the episode. But as I said, also very funny. The runner of SM-33 having the restraining bolt and constantly wanting to attack. I was dying every time he reached his arms out ready to, like, strangle somebody, and then it went off and he couldn't do it, just as he was getting more and more upset about how, you know, his vicious pirate lair had been turned into a you know, this luxury spa for rich people. So strong episode. I sort of suspect next week's episode might be a little bit of a quieter episode. I suspect it might be where we get into some backstory stuff for Jode. It might be I could almost see it being a bottle episode for the kids, where they have to figure out how to get out on their own now. And it might be the time when a lot of the issues they've been dealing with amongst themselves come to the surface. So that when we lead into the last two episodes, we're sort of ready to go back to Aton, having, you know, been on the journey and experienced a few new things and changed a little bit, and ready to confront whatever secrets remain there. But I and look, as always, happy to be wrong, but I'm expecting kind of a quieter episode next week, and I'm looking forward to, potentially getting into some of those character questions that have been, plaguing us for this season. And I say plaguing, what I really mean is driving the action for this season, as much as the crazy, wacky adventure. So strong, I'll give it a strong 9 out of 10. Again, just expecting that, the last couple of episodes might bring it home to a full 10 out of 10 from me.
And I will say too, I did, like I said, I rewatched the whole season up until this, and I watched the episode from last week right before this. I'm now in like so much agreement with what you said about the missing 10 minutes of the last episode, because watching it again and like really analyzing it, the parts of the episode that are there are pretty good. Like I watching it for a second time, I'm like, okay, yeah, like this really does work in a lot of ways. It's literally the fact that it was missing that chunk of extra stuff that should have been there. What was kind of then bleeding into the rest of it and making the rest of it lower quality for me. But going and watching it again, knowing like, is that what's going on, and analyzing for it, that was it. I just, for some reason, I feel like a chunk of that script, just for budgetary reasons or whatever, was just not made, because so that is my kind of additional opinion after now seeing that episode again, and seeing it in context of a kind of a marathon of all the episodes. So then kind of bringing it into kind of a relevant assessment of the show so far, like it's basically almost a perfect show for me that's just missing 10 minutes somewhere. Like I love all the other episodes. I think they're all pretty good. I love a good amount of that episode from last week, and I love this episode. So I think we as long as we don't have just weird gaps where they're just missing plot and pieces of the story that should be there, or character development that should be there, I think that this show has a very optimistic outlook for how it's going to continue and end. I agree. And for as much as I appreciated the added 10 minutes of this episode, I was still watching going, God, this is so fun. I wish there was another 5 minutes. That's probably what's holding it back from being a full 10 out of 10 is I enjoyed the whole like booby trap thing so much. And I know you're always supposed to leave them wanting more, but like, I still want to end a meal feeling full, even though I'd like to eat more. I still want to feel full. And I was like, with this one, I was like, I feel like if you'd given me just a little bit more of that side dish, I would have been even happier. It wouldn't have overstuffed me. I would have been even happier if we'd gotten just a little bit more of them, like having to work through some of the, the tricks and traps of Captain Reynolds and his his lair there. Also, when SM33 first said his lair, I thought he said his leg. And so I assumed Captain Reynolds had like a peg leg that he had turned into like a data drive. And so I was like, oh, they have to like go to his I still figured they were going to his lair, but I thought they were going there to retrieve like a peg leg. And so when Jode was like, look for anything that might be out of place, I'm like, aren't you looking for his leg? And then when I rewatched the episode, I realized lair it sounded a little bit too much like leg when I was still in the post Christmas morning bliss, I suppose. But this show through 5 episodes has been a real fun ride, and looking forward to seeing how it all comes to a conclusion in the final 3 episodes over the next 3 weeks. But for now, we will begin to wrap things up for this week. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching and listening. This, unfortunately, will be the last show of 2024. We will not be back until next year. So hopefully you can survive that long amount of time between 2024 and 2025. But in order to do that, just follow us on social media at the SWU. We certainly will not stop posting over there. I guess for those of you that are still on the Facebook who have not been too lazy to get over to the Blue Sky, I should remind that our page, there's not our page. It's just it's a museum for display. Oh, it's in a display case and it's sitting there. We cannot post on it. So if you're following that one, you're not going to get any updates from us. You can confirm that by looking at the last time we posted on that page. So go search for the Star Wars Underworld again. Find our actual page. It's called the SW Underworld, or I think
it's the
like
SWU.
Yeah, it's called the SWU. That's right. It's called the SWU. That's our actual page. That's where the posts are. So if you've been like, wait, I haven't seen a Star Wars Underworld post in like a month, that's why. It's not just because we moved to Blue Sky. It's also because we had to make a second Facebook page because Facebook is really, really dumb. So I want to remind everybody of that, because I have a feeling there's a few people that are from the old page that haven't moved over that are still active. Most people, though, are just also at a museum themselves. So it's a night at the museum over on Facebook at this point right now with the dinosaur social media network. Dominic, thank you so much for hosting today.
It was my pleasure, as always. This was a fun little bonus Christmas treat here to sit down and talk about this episode with you and with everybody listening. We used to do, for a lot of years, we would do a show on December 26th. We would do a big Boxing Day special. If you go back to like the 2015 to 2019 era, those were like big shows with a lot of guests, and they were like true extravaganzas. And then they sort of reached a point where they were just too much work to put together and very difficult over the holidays, that we sort of decided, you know what? Let's go on break instead of doing a big show. And so we sort of stopped doing them, and then Skeleton Crew forced our hand by having an episode on Christmas Eve, and December 26th would just be our regular Thursday recording. And so it was fun to throw back to that. So there was a question, like there was a comment way at the beginning in the chat, like way at the beginning of the show, where somebody was asking, Matthew Hardy was saying, does this count as a Boxing Day special? I say it does. It's the 9th, 10th, one of these 10th Boxing Day special. I don't know. I can't remember how long we did them for, but we did a lot of them. So we'll count this one as a bonus, as the epilogue Boxing Day special. But a lot of fun. Looking forward to being back next year to continue discussing this. And we'll see everybody in 7 days and a calendar switches time.
That is right. Other things we want to remind you about, in addition to following us on social media at DominicJ25 and at Seek3PO, is to, on your way out, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel here, you can also become a channel member to support us financially. That would very necessary to keep things going, since it costs a little bit of money to run the show. And of course, check out our Discord as well. Link is in the description. And next up, it's the other shows on the Star Wars Underworld Network. On this channel, you'll find the latest episodes of Ion Cannon and Tractor Beam, and also search up the Raeside, Raeside, and Tales from Beyond the Galaxy on their own respective channels and platforms. YouTube is the main place for Raeside. Twitch is the main place for Tales from Beyond the Galaxy. That's it. We're out of here. For all of the fantastic contributors and hosts we have here at the Star Wars Underworld, it's been an amazing year. And for Dom, my name is Chris. May the Force be with you.
It's a wrap for 2024.